It's time for The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour The World This Week, where we can welcome Christopher Dickey of Newsweek and The Daily Beast, Paul Taylor of the Reuters News Agency, Claude Guibal of Radio France. We're expecting shortly Craig Capitis of Quartz The Atlantic, who is stuck in traffic. He should be arriving shortly. What is bang on time is our Facebook page. You can view it throughout the week, The World This Week on Facebook. You can also find us on Twitter at FrancoisF24. The operative word for the week is spillover. By the time Syria had apologized for Wednesday's shelling of the Turkish border town of Achakale, Ankara had responded with repeated artillery strikes. Its parliament had green-lighted a 1-year mandate for further military raids if necessary, but also triggered an emergency meeting of NATO and had the UN Security Council working on a motion to condemn Damascus. For now, though, Christopher Dickey, and we've had breaking news this Friday of the Turkish military returning fire after another mortar landed inside its border. For now, though, that's where it stops.
And I think that's going to be where it stops for a while. The important thing for Turkey is that it still continues to operate as the rear base, the rear guard for the rebels in Syria, and that it can do that without having to pay any real consequences for it. I mean, the Syrians, if they really wanted to make an issue, would go after the rebel bases, which are just more or less just over the border in Turkey, but they're not going to. They don't want to risk that. So this is a way of pushing the Syrians back and saying, don't even think about it. Don't even come close to attacking us or threatening these rebel bases that are inside Turkey. And I think that's where it'll stay for a while. But as the situation continues to deteriorate, and certainly Claude knows more about the immediate situation than I do, anything could happen. And everybody has been sort of wondering, will there come a moment when Turkey will intervene in a major way in at least a portion of Syria and create some kind of safe haven or some kind of no-fly, no-drive, no-shoot zone to push things back from its border.
The areas where you were, was it effectively almost like a safe haven?
Depends where you were, actually, and what you call a safe haven, because there were shellings every day, I was not that far actually from what's happened in Turkey. Actually, I was around Aleppo, and it's true you have shelling every day. You have most of the area is under control of the FSA, the Free Syrian Army. But you still have, regular army, loyalist army checkpoints everywhere. You have the Azaz airport, which is still controlled by the regime.
And air supremacy.
Yes. And what is interesting, actually, I just wanted to talk about what happened in Turkey. What is interesting is that Turkey is responding very aggressively to what happened, because it's a retaliation to what happened earlier in June when the Syrian shot down a Turkish warplane, and Turkey did nothing at that time, just was taken by surprise and did not move, And I think that the response today is more linked to what happened in June than what happened today.
Yeah, I mean, the story about the Turkish warplane, I think, was a bit unclear. It may have penetrated into Syrian airspace. Exactly when it was shot down and by whom and so on, it was all a little bit unclear. I think one of the problems for Turkey, if you look at it from Turkey's point of view, is that in a way Turkey's sort of worst nightmares could come true in Syria. The disintegration to some extent of central control in Syria is allowing a space for Kurds to take over a large area of sort of northeastern Syria. They are friendly with the PKK, who are fighting for more autonomy or independence in Turkey. And at the same time, Turkey faces an influx of refugees, tens of thousands of people, and the prospect of indefinite instability on its southern border. Erdogan, faced with that, is sort of trying to put up a deterrent to try and stop the conflict from spilling in, whether or not, I mean, he doesn't have public support at this stage, according to opinion polls, for actually taking offensive action inside Syria. And the Turkish public, according to the polls, are not very pleased with his handling of the crisis so far.
Interesting that you mentioned that because that's the domestic aspect of it. What's also interesting is it really is a game of political hot potato. Panelists, present company included, I must say, have repeatedly said that the West would always wait for Ankara's cue before any intervention. The Prime Minister on Thursday seemed to be kicking the can westwards in a speech where he denounced Syria.
On the one hand, they say it was an accident. On the other hand, the same incident repeats itself today. What kind of an accident is this? It happens once, twice, but how can it happen for the third time, fourth, fifth, sixth, even for the seventh and eighth time? Therefore, we call on all our friends to be sensitive on this issue.
He calls on all his friends. In the debate on Thursday night, we had a representative from the AKP who was squarely saying, why isn't the U.S. taking the lead on all of this?
Well, things worked out so well in all the other places. I mean, we're looking at Libya right now, and I'm sure that we can't feel too good about the way things happen there. And because there's absolutely no support, talk about domestic politics, there's no support in the United States for an intervention in Syria or involvement in another Middle Eastern war anytime soon. It's on Turkey's border. Turkey's made the commitment of supporting the rebels in a big way. I mean, we can't have this discussion without saying the rebels would have no place to go and would have had no place to go for the last 18 months if they couldn't go into Turkey and operate out of Turkey and be armed through Turkey. So Turkey is a participant in the war. And for it to then say, oh, well, it's up to our friends to get involved is a little disingenuous. I mean, are the Americans involved? Yes. Are the French involved? Yes. Are the Brits involved? Yes. But at a level that they're trying to keep so low that they don't have to commit themselves publicly in any major way.
And Claude Guibert, I suspect that you bumped into a lot of people inside of Syria who've got an opinion on this.
Everybody you're talking to, the first thing people are asking you is, why have you abandoned us? They all know that nobody wants to intervene in Syria. They know that what they say actually is that they say that the international community is taking the pretext of the problem with the jihadis not to intervene in Syria. They all know about what happened in Libya. They all know that the international community did not need a green light from NATO to from the UN in Kosovo. Right. Everybody knows about that, so they said, okay, you're just taking pretext and stop talking about us. I mean, you medias have been talking about us for a year and a half, and what do we get from that? More shelling, more people killed, and nothing is happening.
And Chris Verdicki, there really is the impression that something has changed this week. 2 Hezbollah funerals in Lebanon, one for a reported commander, according to the opposition, killed in the Qusair area on the Syrian side of the border. There really is a feeling that there is this sort of sectarian spiral.
I think there is a sectarian spiral. I think it's going to be very ugly and very dangerous. You're going to have the most radical kind of Shia sectarian elements. You're going to have Hezbollah, on the one hand, very well armed, very well trained, but you do have a jihadi element that is not inconsiderable, that is closely tied to sort of al-Qaeda acolytes and al-Qaeda interests. Then there's a much larger group of rebels who don't fit either of these groups, but what happens in a prolonged conflict is that the extremes always rise to the top because they're the ones with the commitment, the fanaticism, and the endurance to do that. And that's what the people that Claude is talking to are saying, save us from these guys. Not just save us from Assad, but save us from the extremes. The problem is that the Americans are not going to do that, and I would say they shouldn't. I think when you intervene, you do what you can do. You could do Libya, because Libya was about a war that was fought on one road by the sea. It was basically just that.
And it still took 2 months.
And it still took months to do. Yeah. And the results are still very unclear. Syria is a big country with a big population, a complicated landscape, and a lot of powerful neighbors. The U.S. is not going to go in there anytime soon.
5 killed in that first shelling that we saw inside the Turkish border. A UN Security Council condemnation ensued. That followed this Friday by the condemnation of the 48 killed in a series of explosions earlier this week in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Explosions, Paul Taylor attributed to a group called Jabhat al-Nusra, affiliated with Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, well, as Chris has said, there are clearly jihadi elements involved. Our reporters in the field have encountered these people. They are, some of them, quite open to media coverage. There is a dispute about how strong they are, how many they are, and so on. But the fact that they are there is not disputed.
Let's say hello, by the way, to Craig Kapitas, who is just joining us, courtesy of the Eurostar from London. Thank you for being
All
with us.
needed his newspapers. I had to bring them.
Thank you.
There
I
you
was
go.
my favorite delivery boy.
Before we close this chapter on Syria, Claude Guibal, let's take a minute to go over what you saw in Syria. You traveled to Idlib province. We heard your reports on the radio. We could perhaps take a look at a couple of the photos. This is the area there in Idlib province. A couple of the photos that you tweeted while on assignment. One of a school that was bombed in Azaz. Can you tell us about Azaz and about that picture?
Azaz was the first town to be liberated last summer. There's nothing in Azaz today, just waste. The city has been blasted.
How many times?
At least twice at the beginning of in mid-July. And now, almost every day you have mortars being shelled. You don't know. In the north of Syria, a bomb will fall every day. You just don't know exactly when and exactly where. You don't know if there will be casualties or not. But what people do is they don't sleep anymore in their homes. Every night, most of the people, they just go in the fields and they sleep under the olive trees. People I've met, most of the people are backing the FSA, but also if you go into the houses, and for instance, I remember a woman I met in a house, and it was actually at the house of a free fighter. But the woman, when they saw a woman coming in the house, they said, okay, come with us. And we started talking about the kids. The kids haven't been to school for 8 months. The gas has been cut off by the regime. There's no more fuel, oil.
And if they're sleeping in the fields, isn't there winter coming on soon?
And the winter is coming, and now things are getting very expensive. Food is getting very expensive. And these women, they were telling me, we have a message that you have to say, stop backing the two sides. Russia has to stop backing the regime, and the international community, you have to stop backing the FSA, because we are afraid when we see someone from the FSA, because that will mean more bombing on us. And we, the civilians, are the one who are trapped just in the middle. These women, they were not regretting the former times, but they are afraid and they don't know what tomorrow is going to be. And I was amazed. Every interview I've made ended with tears. Of course, the woman, but also fighters, also Islamists with big birds, surgeons. And I'm not talking about red eyes, people like, the shin is shivering and you have big tears dropping on. And men, we are in a very conservative area where Sunni Islam is very strong. Men don't cry in front of women. So that means that the situation is so tense, the anguish is so strong, and the people, they're not expecting anything now from the foreign community. They're just asking to stop the bombing. And the problem is we don't have an answer. Are you going to arm the rebels? Giving weapons to who? That's the problem. Even if the FSA is trying to get organized, who are you going to give the weapons to? And you also have to answer the legitimate fears of the Christian community, the Alawi community, the Kurds. Everybody is afraid of what's going to happen tomorrow. I think that the Syrian conflict is maybe the more complex conflict we have witnessed for years and years. It's, And
a reminder perhaps of things that had happened, unfortunately, in years past in neighboring Lebanon. Yeah. Claude Guibal, obviously we'll continue to watch that with you. Another story from the region. Last week, Israeli diplomats preempted their prime minister's speech at the UN by leaking reports that conclude that sanctions on Iran are working. Well, this week came a tangible sign that Tehran is indeed feeling the squeeze. Furious money changers at the bazaar clashing with police amid a spectacular nosedive of the currency. Officially, the rial bottomed out a while ago and has stabilized. That's the official exchange rate. But the informal rate, one reported even by Iranian news agencies themselves, tell a different story. It's bottomed out, it seems. The regime blaming foreign agents for undermining the currency. And this Friday, state television broadcasting the sermon of ultra-conservative cleric Ayatollah Ahmad Khatami.
Our nation has showed that it won't face exhaustion under pressures. Our nation has the experience to live through hardship. But the West don't have this experience. With the grace of God, the Iranian nation will make them tired and will force them out of the battlefield.
Paul Taylor, just a quick word on this. Is this a sign that really is the squeeze is on?
I think the squeeze is on. I think it's a mixture of the impact of the sanctions and probably some rather poor management by the Iranian authorities as well, because part of the latest panic seems to have been set off when they created a foreign exchange center which was supposed to provide foreign exchange at a subsidized rate or at a special rate for people in importing certain basic goods. And that seems to have set off a panic, and everybody then tried to get hold of dollars, and the rial went down, down, down. You've got to remember that the rial now is worth about a quarter of what it was when I was last there in 2005.
Quarter.
Roughly, in terms of dollars. The largest rial note, which is now 100,000 rials, is worth $2.50. So, you know, people are carrying around. We're getting a bit like the sort of era of hyperinflation in. We're not yet wheelbarrows, but certainly
close to that.
wads of banknotes.
We're going to have to break. We're going to come back, though. This is The World This Week.